James Blundell, good to have you at Noise11.com to talk about Patience Wins, an album a long time coming, James.
And doesn't it just?
We'll talk about how you arrived at that title as we go through, but there has been quite the gap in between records. What have you been doing when you haven't been being you?
Well, consecutive marriages, 4 children, running the family sheep and cattle station in southeastern Queensland, seemingly getting involved in any righteous cause that came past the front door and loving. Although it's been a very busy, 20 years. Even halfway through the more formal recording part of my career, the albums all seem to have the gestation period of an elephant. And I've never quite known why that was, but here we are, some 8 years since the last release, and I think that's probably stretching it a bit too much. Currently residing in the Where Are They Now file, as Spinal Tap so famously said.
So what compelled you to want to share the stories on this record then?
Look, it was a beautiful way in. A long-term collaborator, a guy called Terry MacArthur, brilliant lyricist in his own right, a beat poet. He and I worked together with a guy called Phil Rigger on an album called Deluge in, I think it was 2000, but really a long time ago. And about 4 years ago, he rang and said, look, I've been approached by a label that starting up, they want a couple of, I use the term marquee because that's what the term was, acts to give them a stable. Would you be interested? And I said, look, if it's working with you and you're interested in these people, they must have the things that we think are important. And as is always the case, that never eventuated, but the permutations after that led to reconnecting with Terry, going through a bunch of songs. I had a lot of material because I've always written whether I was recording or not. I've done that since I was 7 years of age, which has been a blessing time after time. And I wound up in upstate New York in Rhinebeck, which is very close to Woodstock, working with friends of Terry's who he'd done work there with, who turned out to be the A team of every session I've ever been in. And I've been blessed beyond words over the years to play with some of the best musicians in the world, but this was just something else completely different. It was a residential studio. I was really happy with the songs. There was a reasonably world-weary theme to most of the stuff, but as a Sagittarian, I've always been the ultimate optimist. So even the cynicism was marred with but it'll be right, and that fell into the right hands. A wonderful musician called Larry Campbell, who'd been inducted into the American Music Hall of Fame as an instrumentalist 2 years prior to us recording, was the producer or co-produced with a guy called Justin Guip, who'd been Levon Helm's direct protege, Levon being the drummer from the band. Mm. And the pièce de résistance personally was I'd actually asked for Bill Payne from Little Feat 25 years ago when I was working in Nashville. And that stage of the game, Little Feat was still fully active, so getting Bill Payne was, not really going to ever happen. But this time around, he was free and knew the guys, Larry and Justin, very well. And the story came to him that I'd requested him on an album 25 years ago, and he turned up and was there for 5 days, and we had an absolute ball. And we had Boss Skaggs as bass player, a guy called Lincoln Schfelder. And again, I think you and I discussed this 20 odd years ago. My musical background and influence is really, really varied. So Down to the Left and Silk Degrees were really influential albums. So to be playing with the guy who'd played on those albums was like, whoa, because Boss Skaggs is notorious for firing musicians. Apparently he's particularly difficult to please. And it was just a great bunch of players. And Terry MacArthur's colleague, guy called Mika Kiokanen from Finland, was involved as a co-writer and a great pianist and acoustic player. It was just a really wonderful session. It was the first album I've ever recorded that I didn't play a note of music on. I drank way too much vodka and just reverted to being the bloke lucky enough to sing the songs, and it was blissful. The whole thing was in an idyllic setting with incredibly accomplished musicians.
That's an incredible lineup of musicians. I could just imagine the stories when you're down tools and weren't recording.
That was the most beautiful part of it. And just those guys, particularly Larry, Justin and Bill, their combined collection of friends and acquaintances, I think it's best summarised by when Larry Campbell and I had our first Zoom meeting pre-production some 6 months before I got to the studio. Larry is a New Yorker, but just a really, really cool guy. And he said, well, I think this is going to work because when I read your background, everybody you cite as an influence I have played with. That was Jackson Browne, James Taylor, Paul Simon, Bruce Springsteen, all the amazing artists in the sort of singer-songwriter genre, and he'd played with all of them.
So there's some names we do know. One name I don't know, Lily Brown, on the song One of Those Saturday Nights, a fresh voice that you've brought in. What drew you to working with Lily on that track?
Now, you will enjoy this. You really will enjoy this because Lily Brown actually recorded with us under a different name. And she's a delightful person, but she's had quite spectacular, a different field of music. And when it came time to release the album, I let her know because it was a 3-year wait, and I wasn't to use her contemporary recording artist name. So Lily Brown is an enigma, but she does have a magnificent voice, and I'm not allowed to tell you any more about her. So there's a bit of intrigue for you.
Oh, wow. Not even a hint?
So you thought, I really can't. I was specifically asked not to. So that to me is very reminiscent of the kind of crazy stuff that went down in the 70s when Casablanca was doing its thing, and so-and-so wasn't talking to such and such, and everything was just, I can't say it. It intrigues me. I love it. It actually, I find it fascinating and enjoyable. Great singer, really good singer.
We'll start the rumours. Lily is Taylor Swift.
Yeah. So you went straight to it. I mean, I probably gave it up, but no, it's not Taylor Swift. The other thing you'll enjoy in one of the co-writing sessions that a fellow who spoke about off-air, a guy called Bill Page from Ex-Mushroom Music put together, the songwriting session came through with Robert Zimmerman. And I'm going, right, someone is stitching me up here. And I literally waited in case Bob came on the screen, but it was a delightful guy from Texas called Robert Zimmerman, and we had a good laugh about that. I said, do you ever get any of Bob's royalty checks? He said, unfortunately, no.
And to this day, you can now claim, quite honestly, you have worked with Robert Zimmerman.
You got it, which I do often.
Yeah. Some people I do know, and some dear friends, Patsy and Dave, After the Storm's a song. Have you performed live with them, or is this so far a recording only?
Not yet. Actually flying down to Melbourne next week to rehearse. We have a show in Tamworth. I should know this date, 21st of January, I'm pretty sure, but don't quote me, which is pathetic, being the artist who's supposed to be at the show. But that was, given the nature of the sessions that had delivered the album, it had to be something absolutely spectacular to nudge its way into the lineup. And the head of the label that Patient Twins has released on Ambition Records, a delightful bloke called Robert Rigby. And when we had our first meeting, it had been suggested that I should catch up with him by long-term friend Greg Shaw, who's the person I've known longest in the music industry. Robert and I hit it off straight away. And in that first meeting, he said, look, I do have another couple of artists on the label who know I'm talking to you and wondered if you'd be interested in co-writing and doing a track. And I said, absolutely. I mean, that's the point of the whole thing, meeting other people. But I was so impressed by that session. They've got a fantastic studio down in Williamtown? Yarraville in Melbourne, which is a hidden gem. It's a bar, restaurant, recording studio with a theaterette called Mantra Kitchen, Bar and Kitchen Studio. Fantastic. But their producer of choice was Kenny Royston, who was Luke Combs's producer early on the piece. So having had the experience that I'd had in the residential studio with Larry and Justin and Bill and Lincoln and all those guys, to do a session with Kenny in Nashville, streaming, never saw his face, but he was a great producer, really called things beautifully. And the result, I think, was every bit as good as anything we'd recorded in in the super session. So including After the Storm and getting to know Patch and Dave was just an unexpected delight. Really cool people.
The album opens up with The World Don't Stop. Is that a reflection of personal resilience, or is that more a commentary on rural life?
No, it was actually very first person. All the images in that, I dropped out in 96 or 95, 1995, 1996, for the simple reason that music had always been so important personally as a consumer, that I felt that I really had no place in that particular cycle of the music world, because we were saying off air that you left radio in the mid-90s, and that was pretty much full formation dancing and dance music. That was it. There wasn't much else making playlists. And I felt superfluous, or what do the army say? Surplus to needs at that stage of the game. And shot through with the woman who became the mother of my two oldest children. And we did 12 months in a combi in Europe and England, and then went over to America for 12 months. Would do it all again in a heartbeat, but a lot of those first-hand observations are very real. And when I returned and went back to work, a beautiful singer, you would remember a band called Directions in Groove, Dig, a woman called Tony Mott used to sing for that band, and she was a very dear friend, would tour together for years. And she said, you learned that you're a much nicer person after that trip. The thing you learned that matters the most is the world didn't stop when you stepped off. And I said to her at the time that it really struck a chord. And I said that I'll figure out what to do with that particular line at some stage of the game, and it finally found its feet. In a co-write with a woman called Kim Ritchie, she's a really, really well-travelled and experienced woman, and she caught the thread of it very quickly too. So we wrote that over the phone. I was in this office on the property in Queensland, and she was in Nashville, Tennessee. And she got it straight away, and kept the reason some of those observations are so vivid is she'd keep saying, I just want to dig deeper. I'm sort of on the trip with you now, so I want to know what else you saw that put everything into perspective.
What about It's Almost Anzac Day? I guess that taps into a very powerful national sentiment. How do you sort of approach songwriting and keep the Australian identity in there with taking it too far?
But going back to Terry MacArthur, Terry is a remarkable lyricist, and he and I have worked together for a quarter of a century. And when I saw those lyrics, our family have been, with the exception of my brother and I, we're the first peacetime generation of our family for 5 generations. So we're steeped in military history, and the house I'm in was actually built by the guy who was the most highly decorated Australian soldier in the First World War. So that part of our family lineage is layers deep. And the simplicity of what Terry had written, and the fact that he and I had gone through a process years ago when I ambassador the Vietnam Vets Association of Australia for 5 years and delivered a song called Postcards from Saigon. The point that Almost Anzac Day makes was exactly what all the Vietnam veterans that I dealt with had said, look, we don't need any further recognition, but we will die making sure that future returnees don't suffer the same displacement. And so everything about the song made really clear sense, and it found its feet in the studio with again, just a really great depth of understanding from the producer, who's not involved in the culture. So I think that was really what I was fumbling around trying to get to answer your question directly. Where its strength came from was the basic tenet of the song was recognised by somebody who Anzac Day meant nothing to. It was an unfamiliar concept. Obviously, Memorial Day made sense to him, but I think the strength of the song speaks for itself if somebody from a different culture gets it totally.
What about the title, Patience Wins? Was there a personal moment where that kicked in?
Oh, 100%. This is nearly my favourite story to tell. Kevin Bennett, who I know you'll have spoken to over the years, and a guy called Mark Meyer. Mark played drums on 3 albums with me and is a great writer himself. And he handed me that cassette demo of that song when we were recording handed down at 301 in Castlereagh Street in Sydney. And I've had that song for 30 odd years and have tried to place it probably half a dozen times on different projects. But I guess it just goes to show that this story hadn't been lived enough. Then it fell again into Larry's hands, who heard why I wanted to record it, even though I hadn't written it, but B, his life had phases that really made it personal for him. And I think it sounds like a version of Waiting for a Friend from the Stones. Every time it starts, it makes me feel relaxed. And this is one of the things I love about recording songs that I haven't written. I can be fulsome in my praise of them because I enjoy them as much as anybody who's going to hear them. That song relaxes me. It just makes me feel good. And the fact that it took 30 years to wind up on an album, I think, validates its name perfectly.
What about that guy who won Star Maker back in 1987? Winning that night, there would have been expectations for the career based on that win. Did it all work out to plan?
I think I probably disappointed everybody who got involved systematically for the next 30 odd years. Again, it goes back to the fact that music to me, and particularly growing up in regional Queensland with very, very limited communications, we had ABC radio. That was what we had, and it was a wireless. We didn't even have 240 power back then. We had a power plant that you started every night, charged batteries. But the thing about that, ABC in the late 60s and through the mid 70s, when I really started to absorb what was happening musically, was completely unfettered. There was no genre classification. And I can remember from that radio in the kitchen, hearing the Seekers, Joni Mitchell, The Doors. I fell in love with The Doors as an 8-year-old in southern Queensland, which is, it wouldn't happen now because the focus of demographic and what people listen to is much more defined. But it was so deeply embedded, a very broad palette of musical appreciation and love, that I could never really toe the line that was expected of being a contemporary country artist. And there was a lot of struggle in there. And I do know I disappointed a lot of people, but it was never intentional. It was never like, I'm just going to be a prick now. That wasn't the case. There'd be something about a production or an arrangement. I said, look, I don't know, I just don't reckon that's right. I think it can be better. But then the suggestions they would make had nothing to do with country music. It was something to do with, Bill Monroe's big orchestra from Night Riders in the Sky, Riders in the Sky, Ghost Riders in the Sky. So it was always like unintended people.
Well, on that matter with country music and what we have today, some of the biggest stars currently on the charts today are country stars. We've just had Jelly Roll come through Australia, and Shabusi, Teddy Swims here a couple of weeks ago, were all labelled country. Do you see a resurgence in country back to a time that, I guess This Road, when you had that This Road album, that was a major hit album on the charts, and we're seeing that again currently.
I think it's fantastic. I think it just shows that the public, the listening public, love the narrative. They love their affection to a piece of music and loyalty to a piece of music comes from hearing something that every young artist I work with, so just write what you're thinking, because you'll never manufacture the mindset of the people you're singing for. But if you tell your story from your age, you'll find that you're talking for them anyway, because and I think so. Teddy Swims is a fantastic example. I think he's amazing. But when you look at Teddy Swims, if you'd have been told that was a country artist 30 years ago, there's something dreadfully wrong in the fabric here. But they're all real songs. They've got, when I first got to Nashville, I heard the term the first time that country music is white man's soul, and I think that's probably very true. Ironically, if I'm listening to music for pleasure, I usually default straight back to Stax R&B with Carla Thomas, Otis Redding, and Al Green, because there's so much experience in life in those songs. But I think that the songs that are making the most impact now are songs that people across a much broader section of life relate to, because there's truth in it.
So Patience Wins, the new album for James Blundell. We haven't got to talk to you for a long, long time, and every time we do, it's always a bit of fun. So good to talk to you, James.
Always, and really, truly lovely to catch up. When I saw you or the guys talking to them, good Lord, we'll have something. We'll have a lot to discuss.
Is he still alive? He says.
And out of jail. Two
Yeah,
serious accomplishments. Great, Paul.